And another thing too, we don't know what the toxicology is going to come back as, but we do know that he over medicated Maddie that night. That particular night, he said he texted Jen. Stefan Stearns texted Jen and said, "I gave her an extra pill," which may have meant I gave her 3 extra pills. Right? We don't know what he was telling her or what she knew at this point. So toxicology could show like a really high dosage of the medication. But she saw that text and she knew she didn't call poison control this time. So, I mean, I hold hope for things like that because I do feel like they were over drugging her on a regular basis.
I do too. And that's another area of possible neglect that we could be looking at. Look, if you are
Right.
willfully allowing a child to be, and you're turning your back on the abuse of a child, you're neglecting that child.
Right.
That's where I think the door opens for this one. So this has my star by it as at
Right.
least a very decent possibility.
Good. Good. Yeah. And I know they're still digging. Everyone wants to dig. And from the time the case busted open and we heard the first interview with Jen where she said, "Well, I sent them to bed that night." Everybody's been angry since then. Before that, she had a little more supporters than she does now. There's still people saying, "Oh, I think she was groomed too," but you know,
There are
we'll
people that,
hold off on that.
but from the very beginning, if you watch even the first interview with Stefan there and all the distractions and, oh, sorry about that chirping or whatever it was, and just her whole demeanor with a missing child, with her child missing, I swear that very first time I said, oh my gosh, she absolutely knows what happened. And, you know, I've been I've been calling for her to be held accountable for a long time, but after we get through number 5, I'm going to say why I'm worried she never will be held accountable.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. And being in law enforcement for a long time, you've probably seen thousands of uh, media videos or news stations that you see a parent and then you look back and they're like, "Oh, that parent was convicted later for being part of it," and you're like, "I knew it. I saw that interview, called it," or maybe it was a case that you were covering. So, um, I don't have that extensive knowledge, but just watching things like that and then seeing it, but I'm sure you're close to that and you understand. So that's a
Well,
good one. That's
I
good.
can say the poster child of how people react when they've lost a child was Gabby
Right.
Petito's mom. She
Good
could
one.
care less about her makeup. She could care less about her hair. She was disheveled. She was so an emotional wreck, but still able to communicate. The love for that child dripped off of her, and her honesty dripped off of her. Compare that to like a Susan Smith when she was carrying on the bow in the hair, perfectly fixed little curls, her outfit perfect. How she carried on to me was very deceitful, not telling the truth early on. And I think law enforcement really probably very early on suspected that, even though it took them 9 days to get through that case. And anyone in law enforcement who saw the Jennifer Soto interviews, to me, it just dripped with deceit.
Yeah, the news anchor, the Fox News anchor, I can't remember her name. She's a hero in my book. She actually called the law enforcement. She called one of the detectives and said, "Hey, I interviewed this lady and her boyfriend. Something's wrong. Something's going on." She had just this feeling that, and it was like pulling teeth because she would say, "Well, what's her, like try to get her name, Madeline." And she never said it. She never said her name. She says, "Well, as a mother, what's your intuition say?" "Oh, we just want her to come home," whatever that means. And that lady was like, "I need to do something." So she did. She did. And so yeah, if she saw it, I'm sure law enforcement saw it. And they also talked about her talking in the past tense. Ugh. All right.
Yeah.
So
No, I
good.
agree. And a lot of these reporters, people like yourself too, people that are used to
Right.
interviewing people, you see deception often. And when
Right.
you see it often enough and then you see it bear out that it was deception, you learn to look at the tricks of the trade, if you will. Brian,
Right.
for those of you who watch News Nation, he's a really good
Yes.
judge of character too. We always cuss and discuss these different cases, and I tell you what, um, reporters like the young woman you just mentioned, they have a keen eye for people when they're lying.
Right. Yeah. That's yeah, I figured as much. So that was good. That was awesome of her. And thank you everyone that's here. I see the chat is popping. Everyone's happy for you to be here. And I
Oh,
mean, you're just getting through those. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at the third one. Or we already did the third one. I'm sorry. Let's do number 4, accessory after the fact. And this might land on the murder case. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
unless there's something that comes forward, I don't see accessory at all. Typically, accessory under
Okay.
Florida law is you've actually helped somebody to escape or to. I don't think she was an accessory after the fact. Out of all of these possibilities, I think this is the least
The
probable.
least. Okay. Perfect. That's awesome to hear. Because I was wondering too, what would that be unless it was in the actual murder and Stefan comes along and says, well, actually, she did it because he's been giving hints in his interviews that Jen was involved, possibly. The parents have given hints, and so is he. So I'm wondering if he's ever going to just come out and say it, like Jen did it, and I hid the body for, or I hate saying it, but dump the body, dispose of Maddie for her. Would that be even accessory after the fact, or would that be directly involved at that
That's
point?
conspiracy. And that is
Okay.
another star for
Oh, okay.
possibility. I know that's the last one you have listed. I think
Right.
a conspiracy charge in a lot of these different underlying violations is possible. Was she a co-conspirator? And that causes that's a little bit more complicated because you need two overt acts. But overt acts can be
Oh,
merely a cell phone call. It can be a text message. It can be a conversation. It can be actually doing something, driving somewhere, loaning him her car. That could be an a conspiratorial type action. So it'll be interesting to see if they can put together a conspiracy, if they can prove knowledge in some way. And I think that'll
right.
come through digital messaging if
Yeah.
it existed.
I wonder if it's going to be just a he said, she said, if Stefan does say, you know what? And we saw the love note, right? The poem, the always poem where he says, I would die for you. And I didn't want this to happen. So let's say he does say, you know what? I don't want the death penalty. I'm going to implicate Jen. Is that going to be a he said, she said thing if they don't have any paper trails?
I think we can 100% count on that being the direction of his defense team. It's just almost
Okay.
100%. They're going to point at her. They're going to try to raise reasonable doubt that he didn't do this, that it was really Jen Soto, that she did it out of jealousy or she did it out of, anger, that remember where you talked about that she wasn't the chosen one, but he moved on, Woody Allen like
Right.
to
Yeah.
Madeline. And so I see that being the defense strategy for sure. And this leads me to what I said before the segue. Why do I think she hasn't been charged yet? Even though these possibilities exist. And I think it's because very simply, law enforcement needs her. It's you
Eh,
got to make a deal with the devil sometime, just like happened in the Adam Montgomery case, with little Harmony Montgomery, Kaylee Montgomery. They
Kaylee.
needed her to put the linchpin in who, what, when, where, why, and
Oh.
draw us the story. And I'm wondering if they feel like they're going to need Jen Soto to kind of stitch it all together for the jury.